Today's episode is brought to you by the number 5.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, The Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, my man. Back from my camping trip and super tired.
Oof, rough. I wasn't camping. I was farming in Diablo.
Hey-o!
Yeah, fun. Surprisingly fun. It's what.
Yeah, it's still weird to me that you're like not making fun of Diablo. That you're playing it.
I was ever making fun of it. I just actively didn't enjoy it. Was the
I think you would make some like snide comments when I was talking about playing it.
For sure. I definitely would be making snide comments about it.
Nice
now,
necromancer loser.
Yeah. Hey, I'm playing on. And I needed to just turn the game off to make sure that I didn't re-roll into another character because I'm like, I got all my builds. I'm done with this one. I'm gonna move on to another one, like the exact opposite of what you should do. But let's not talk too much about Diablo. Let's talk about all the stuff that's been going on in the High Noon podcast world, High Noon Productions world. Of course, Blackwatch Report, on and on and on, never stops. They went back into, I believe they reviewed, I want to say one of the contenders realms. I don't know. Take a listen to it for sure, though.
Contenders finals and the Open Division finals, and then they previewed the NA Contenders trials. And then they talked about the call-up that we're going to be talking about very soon.
Yes. Okay, awesome. So Blackwatch Report much more on top of their game than we are right now. And in that vein, this episode's going to be maybe, I don't even know if we've really done an episode like this. Maybe not in a while, though. This is going to be, obviously, we're in the, I don't want to say drought. Actually, yes, I do want to say drought of news for Overwatch League. We got a couple of things that we're going to talk about, but it is not the constant stream of stuff, the constant stream of tournaments that we've grown accustomed to. So in that vein, we're going to have a little bit of a weird episode today. We're going to be doing our top 5 players in our top 5 positions in our top 5. It ends there.
Couple too many times. Five lists of 5
Yes.
is the thing here, and the 5 lists that we're going to be doing today are all player rankings.
Yes.
And they are for various positions. Just to kind of give you guys an idea, we're going to be looking at the top 5 main tanks, the top 5 off tanks, the top 5 support players. And then because so much of the first season's metagame revolved around Tracers and Widowmakers, we're going to be doing our top 5 Tracer and Widowmaker players. So not projectile DPS, not hit scan. We are going to specify those particular positions or heroes within the DPS world. I wanted to do some variety. I didn't just want to do, top 5 projectile, hit scan, all those things. Because I wanted to show that we might do these again in the future. We might do another 5 lists of 5,
These
stuff
are nice
like that.
to have in the bank.
Sometimes they're going to be really weird. Like they'll just be weird lists. They might be funny lists. They don't always have to like make sense together either. Like we'll just present 5 things we think would be fun to rank. We'll keep it pretty normal for the first one. But maybe in the future, maybe we'll do a whole 5 lists of 5 where they're all memes. Who knows then.
Let us know what you want to see listed.
Yeah, give us list ideas, and we'll do these
list ideas,
regularly.
and we will ruin those lists for you. But in that vein, Around the Payload is going to be delayed another week because we're going to hopefully on October 6th, the deadline or the signing window is open for the season 1 team. So hopefully we're going to be getting that nice influx of stuff. So we're going to have a lot to talk about.
The Wild West, anything goes portion of free agency begins on Saturday. So that'll be a lot of fun. Don't expect a ton of front loaded news, but at the end of the day, the window for the expansion team exclusive stuff will be closed at that point. So we might really get a nice wrap-up episode next week where we talk all about the expansion teams and what rosters they're unveiling. They might wait for their brandings to be announced, stuff like that, but we'll have to wait and see exactly.
Yeah. I'm thinking that after, or maybe even slightly before, or at least directly right after that, October 6th is when we're going to start getting some stuff. They're going to turn the faucet, so to speak. So that's going to be nice. But what we did have was another episode of our Overwatch League talent interview series with Doa. That is up. That podcast is up. Make sure you check that out on this very feed. Hopefully, you've already listened to it. If not, make sure that you do. But let's talk about what we did last week besides Diablo. Anything else fun and exciting for you, Deathblow?
Yeah, I had my I go every year. I meet up with some old friends from college. We go camping at a state park here in New York. It's right next to a lake. We get a big cabin with a fireplace in it. Do the most uncamping thing you can think of. Never leave that cabin and just play a bunch of board games like nerds. And drink a few beverages, things like that. We have a really good
Nice.
time with it. It's a lot of fun. Eat a ton of food, drink a lot of drinks, and enjoy some people I don't get to hang out with very often.
Yeah.
So it was great to see those guys. Shout outs to Keith and Andy and Julie, who none of which listen to the podcast, so I won't give a shout out.
Yeah. And also you've had the recurring tradition of getting a garbage plate on the way home
Yes,
and
yes,
sending me a picture and not getting
yes,
me one. So
yes. I did
scumbag.
get two. I
Yeah,
honestly, I just never think of it.
You
I
did
really
get
never.
two, but you didn't. None for me.
It's true. I just honestly I never think of it. Like I wake up so early on that Sunday,
Yeah.
and it's like get home before football,
Yeah.
and it's like, do I even have time to get one? And
Right.
so by the time I think like, oh shoot, Blevins asked me that one time if I wanted if I wanted him to get me one, I should return the favor. I'm like in the car on the way home.
You're like
and I'm
already
like,
eating half of your
shit.
second one at
Right. I'm
that
like,
point.
so good.
Plus, you go to Nick Tahoe's, which is not my garbage plate place. So
Stevie T's hot.
Oh, okay, different one.
Lyle Avenue, the real one, the good one.
I go to Henrietta Hot's, which
That's
is
disgusting. Why would you? Oh,
because we've talked about this probably
dude.
more times than anything else besides
I don't
Magic the
think- I don't
Gathering.
think so.
Yeah, they have my perfect garbage plate. It's pulled pork. It's
not a garbage plate.
It's
Oh my
pulled
God,
pork.
next topic.
It's
What did you do? What did you do? How you're ruining my day on Monday here in a way that a work day couldn't.
starts with pulled pork is all I need.
Shut
Is
your
all you need
face.
to know.
Oh my God. Brr.
It's so good. Salt potatoes, French fries, and everything
Not
else.
who knows what you're eating a barbecue plate. This isn't
Yeah,
even a garbage
It's
plate.
so
just
much
barbecue.
better. It's so
Go
much
to
better.
Go to Dinosaur Barbecue if you're in Rochester. Like I'm
Uh,
so mad at you.
yeah.
Right
You're saying that like it's a bad thing. Dinosaur barbecue is amazing.
on my face.
Dinosaur barbecue is amazing. And they don't have meat sauce. Let's move
I
on.
don't disagree with you on the Dino.
There's a dinosaur barbecue in Buffalo too. Okay, we've already talked about Diablo and food more than we're going to talk about Overwatch this episode. But what I did do is a little con before the storm stream with some of the other members of the Overwatch panel that is going to be going on at Con Before the Storm. So that was fun. We got to played some Overwatch together, which I'm quite rusty. And let me tell you, we sure did play against what seemed like professional teams. But basically, all of what I like to call the Omnic Lab game night grinders, all of those, masters and GM players, yeah, they were just running the gauntlet of like, oh, who's done with their scrims for tonight? Just come in and just wail on these podcasters. But we had a fun time. We almost got close to winning. We got close to almost getting close to winning once.
Was Bob there?
Bob was there.
Did he tilt into the ground?
No, he didn't tilt into the
What?
ground. No, he didn't tilt.
Man,
He was streaming. I think he was too stressed out making sure the stream was working to get tilted.
I'm blanking on who it was. I think his name was like Whoopi or something like that. But when we formed the podcasters only team, our first ever day of playing was at Omnic Lab game night. We're like, hey guys, beat the podcasters if you can, right?
Yeah.
So they stacked the crap out of these teams just
Yeah.
constantly to beat us.
Oh my God, Thrill was killing me so much. He destroyed me.
Thrill was on our team and it didn't matter. But we were just getting crushed by a May over and over and over and over again. And Bob lost his mind. But I think it was a combination of everything, right? It was like we did it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then it was like the stupid hero that you don't like. We're not learning anything as a team, like how to
Right.
beat
You're
May. We're not
just
learning
losing
anything.
and you're
Right.
gaining nothing from it.
Right. We're just getting styled on by somebody mechanically way more gifted than us on a
Yep.
hero that's irrelevant. So it was like, it was just a really frustrating experience. He told you about.
Yeah, I did not do very well. But I got like Thrill was just I don't know what it was, but he was just picking me off left and right with Genji, with Widowmaker. But I killed him a couple times, and I'm not gonna lie, I definitely tactical crouched every single time I killed him, even though it was only like 3 times. And I know how Thrill gets. I'm sure he was raging because the next time he came out, he like snap picked Genji and just came and destroyed me like 3 times in a row. But it was totally worth it. Totally worth it. Not even mad.
Yeah, Thrill's tiltable for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so fun because I know, like he headshots me. I'm like, oh, no. But I got him back. In no substantive way. Like we got destroyed still, but it was fun. But yeah, so that was great. If you guys are going to be at BlizzCon, make sure you're going to Con Before the Storm. That is the surprise, the night before the convention in the Hilton. And if you are going to BlizzCon, you know the Hilton. It's the big hotel that's basically connected to the convention center. You can't miss it. Just listen for the yelling and party going on. That is the Hilton. It is in there. But yes, let's move on here to. Does my button just not work anymore? Oh, this is just great.
You've been really bad at drops lately.
No, this okay. I will not contesting that. I'm just saying that my button's literally not working right now.
It would be nice if you had some form of hardware or some form of
Okay,
device that
okay,
would really
bro.
assist you
I'm
with it.
pressing the button. All right. Well, I mean,
Overwatch today. Meme of
Overwatch
the week.
today, meme of the week. I mean, it's literally me saying it anyway. So let's talk about the meme of the week, and this one was great. Do you know the story behind this hockey, the Philadelphia Flyers hockey thing? Okay,
Yeah.
so
Looks like orange grimace.
it's
That's all I know.
the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know if they came out with if this is always their mascot or if they came out with a new mascot, but I saw this thing like before Overwatch, and it really does look like a demonic Muppet. Is
Yep.
basically the best way to describe it. And Philadelphia Flyers made this big thing about you know, unveiling this new mascot that looks like a demonic Muppet. And like we alluded to earlier, there was a call up here. That was, of course, Elk was called up to the Philadelphia Fusion in the Overwatch League and was promptly traded to the Philadelphia Flyers for the demonic Muppet. So we're going to be seeing that demonic Muppet who's called Gritty. He's on the Philadelphia Fusion now, and Elk now plays hockey for the Flyers. So
Good for
um,
you, Elk. It's
all,
a higher salary.
all around, I just got to say, Fusion, top notch meme. Flyers, also top notch meme. I mean, I know probably not too different of departments that are running those social media accounts. May, in fact, be the same exact person. I don't know. But yeah, just. I love it. It's the traditional sports integration. It's the over-the-top, silly Philadelphia Fusion that we know and love. We just need to keep this consistent. I want more of this stuff. I want it in the off season. I want it during the season. I want it to be dumb. I want it to be poking fun at other teams. I want the full spectrum of stuff. Get a team of guys on this and girls. Get a whole team of comedy writers to do this social media. That's what we need. That's
Or
what
hire
Overwatch
us.
League. Or hire us. I'll do it full time. Offer is out there. I'll do it full time. I will head a SNL style team of writers to put out daily social media stupid content.
This
And it
is
will
my
be
one
great.
chance to get meme lord as an official job title on my resume
Yes.
for the rest of my life.
Yes. Okay, let's move on here and let's see if it's that button that doesn't work or if it's just the buttons in general.
All right, it's buttons in general.
It's buttons in
It's
general.
high news.
Yep. I pressed a button
Took
that
care of it.
seemed to do something.
Well,
Oh, It wasn't the drop is all that matters.
I was gonna say I can never hear the drop, so I just assume it didn't work because you hit it a few times. But
Yeah, we're gonna in like 5 minutes. This is gonna be like over. Watch dates. Meme of the week. Is what
that'll
we're
be
gonna
the
hear.
best meme of the week, hands down.
That really will be if it just all and also it randomly just starts playing the shame bell. That would be great. It took over. But we got a new developer update from Jeff from the Overwatch team, of course. Mentioned a bunch of things about the Halloween event. Mentioned the new Torbjorn that's on PTR, and also mentioned something that I normally wouldn't. I would have just kind of overlooked because I'm not colorblind, so I don't think about this. But a lot of people have been making a lot of waves about it, and we actually had. Discord member Wild Thane actually bring it up to us specifically about this colorblind mode improvements. And actually, Wild Thane made a video as well as a Google Doc addressing all the issues that need to be fixed for the colorblind mode. So definitely check that out. I'll put the link to the video in the description. Check that out. Again, like not something that I think about. I mean, Death, you have you're colorblind as well. What did you? What do you think about the colorblind mode?
Cool. Options help. I'm
Yeah.
not super colorblind though, and it's definitely something that affects you in to varying degrees.
Right.
So I have a feeling that mine's just not too bad, or at least it's not commonly a problem with the colors that Overwatch wants to throw in my face. So I've never had a really big issue. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I am happy that they're doing this, but I don't know or think it's gonna, make a leaps and bounds of difference for me personally as a colorblind person. But again, like I usually had problems with like purple and red back in the day. Like
Yeah.
blue and red is not a color combo. Like there are stark differences to me,
Yeah.
whether the shades are right or wrong. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that I'm sure. And hey, there could be problems that I don't even realize I'm having
True.
that could just suddenly become better. So
True.
it's an improvement, it's an iteration, and those are just all positives, but I don't know how big of it is
Yeah.
personally.
I'm just glad that they're making the game better for more people. Is basically the
Right?
long and short of it. The other news we already kind of mentioned: Elk coming up to Philadelphia Fusion. Any additional thoughts on that? Okay, go guys. In case you didn't know, he's not actually playing for the Flyers. It's he's just on the Fusion. That was a joke. I know the drop didn't play, but it wasn't true. Any thoughts on Elk coming up?
He was signed as a two-way player, so
Oh, it's
he's
just a two-way player.
yes. So we have another two-way player being brought in.
Oh.
Personally, I mean, we've talked a lot, and we're gonna talk about it again soon. How big of a fan I am of Neptuno and what he was able to
Mhm.
do in the first season of Overwatch League. I can't imagine Elk really encroaches on his playtime.
Mhm.
But now they get to really bring him in, pay him enough to really focus on this being what he does. It could be a long term kind of a long-term decision here. This could be a developmental thing. It could be meta dependent. Listen, like we saw Neptuno on Mercy.
Yeah.
That's it, Mercy. So
And
we don't
Battle
really
Mercy.
know, how his Lucio stacks up to a player like
Mhm.
Elks. We don't know what the support meta is going to look like. We don't
True.
know if there's going to be a new support hero added by the time the season starts.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that can go on here. And I think Elk is just a player that the Philadelphia Fusion really like. They don't want to see him go elsewhere and have to play against him. Again, it might be really meta dependent. It could be not meta dependent. It could be Neptuno's job as long as he's in a Fusion uniform. I really
Mhm.
don't know what to make of this. But at the end of the day, I love seeing these two-way contracts get filled out. But I do expect to see Elk primarily remaining a Fusion University player more than.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of it is that Fusion University wants to keep their dominance asserted. So yeah, definitely good to see the two-way contracts, but I'm very interested to see how we're going to see them actually utilized. Is Elk,
Yeah,
yeah. So um,
probably just for breaks, but we'll have to see because you like
yeah.
become disqualified from an entire season of contenders if you play more than like two matches or something. I don't remember all the exact details, but
Mhm.
it's definitely punishing to the academy team to use one of their star key players, their
Right.
shot caller,
Hmm.
for 3 games, and then they just get crushed. But at the end of the day, I don't know that the Fusion care super much. I mean, I'm
Right.
sure they'd rather win than lose with their
Right.
academy team,
But they'd also
but
rather win an Overwatch league than
right, and the money is to be made as an organization
yeah.
by winning Overwatch League.
It's
So.
just like in minor league baseball, like those minor league baseball. I heard a story or something, like a radio story about minor league baseball coaches and how it's just like the most stressful job ever because if their players start doing well, they just lose them. So
Mhm.
they're like very weirdly incentivized because they actually have no recourse because like if the management wants them on the major league team, like they're gone, and like the player never wants to be in the minor league, so it's a weird middle ground that no one wants to be in except like the managers that like that's their livelihood and like the staff like that is their job. I mean, to a lesser extent, maybe they're trying to get pulled up to the major leagues in a coaching position, but that's just a different lineage. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Um, One other thing that I'll mention briefly, but we won't go into, is that there are alleged leaks of possible details about the Paris team. Go check all of your favorite leak stuff for that. We'll cover it when it's actually officially announced. But if you are looking to see the leaks, you can go check all that stuff out and all the normal places that you'd be able to find leaks. But the last piece of news here that I want to talk about is that we once again get to say that there's a team in the Overwatch League that are not cowards. Rascal is back and ready for
Mm,
action.
they might be cowards. You've got to use them. You've got to
That's
use them.
true, but they have the possibility of not being cowards, and that is the San Francisco Shock pulling up Rascal from NRG, the academy team.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
A player that never, from a performance standpoint, deserved to be cast aside or
yeah,
released from the league.
yeah,
Just didn't really fit in with the team. He was traded to a bad situation,
yep.
and it just didn't work out there. I'm really pumped. The league's going to be better for a high skill player like Rascal to be in it.
Hmm.
He's also really great at what used to be meme picks, you know what I mean? Like he would break out like the May. Now they're
Yeah,
just reworking all these heroes until they're viable and not memes anymore.
yeah.
So who knows? But he's always been kind of that niche off meta player that'll play something goofy,
Hmm.
which is great from a spectator standpoint. And yeah, his skill really can't be denied.
Hmm.
When the London Spitfires season started, we talked about them as having the best core group of DPS players, and a
Yeah,
big part of the reason why was because Rascal was their number 3 off the bench, and we thought he was a easily starting caliber player.
yeah.
So I think this is great for them. Maybe less great for Sinatra. I don't really know. It's going to be
Probably
really
doesn't
hard to
help
bring
him at least.
Architect out, but it'll
Yeah,
probably just be a rotation between the 3 of them. Um, Predominantly, and then I don't know what happens with Baby Bay in
I
that
was gonna say
scenario. Um, but
probably a
yeah,
starter for an expansion team.
yeah.
Honestly,
Listen, it could also be great for Sinatra. It might just let them give him the ability to just say, okay, you are going to be the tracer player, the one trick, like just
right,
do that. And then
right.
it's like Rascal, you're the Doomfist, and
Yeah.
then Architect, you're the Widowmaker, and
Hmm.
then they'll have kind of other heroes or something like that. Baby
Yeah.
Bay, you're the McCree, and then figure out any other heroes that come up or become meta on
Right.
the fly. And like we saw that with Jake, his performance
True.
in stage 4 boosted tremendously because he didn't have to worry about trying to learn Tracer anymore. Brigitte pushed her out of the meta completely, and he was just able to focus on other heroes that were in his wheelhouse. And most notably, like his Hanzo was
Hmm.
really really good. One of the better Hanzos that we saw in stage 4, which was old Hanzo still.
Yep.
So just so everybody remembers. But yeah, so listen, the ability to specialize, the ability to narrow your hero pool can be a good thing for a lot of players, and this might give San Francisco the ability to get better play from Sinatra on his Tracer and better play from Architect on his Widow if they're focused.
Yeah, they're not going to have to be put into weird spots, and the Shock definitely have the flexibility from a roster standpoint. It's also, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one of those DPS get shipped off to an expansion team.
Could
Uh,
as well.
I I feel like if I'm Baby Bay, like I want to be a starter on a team rather than the like literal fourth DPS. But I don't know. Maybe that opportunity hasn't come up. But let's move on here to the bulk of what what we're going to talk about today, and that is our top fives. We're going to start here with
The lists are in no production. The way you're saying it makes me feel like we ordered the order that the lists are in, and it's just
is
5 lists of 5. Our
no.
top 5 main tanks.
These are my 5 favorite positions, and they're my
Oh my
top
God.
5 players in those positions. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The number 5 favorite position here is going to be main tanks.
Sure.
We'll do main tanks. So who are your top 5 main tanks in
Let's
the league for season 1?
we'll start from the bottom when we do these.
Sure, that makes
So
sense.
my first main tank coming in at number 5, I'm going with Gamzu here.
Okay.
Listen, the 10-0 run in stage 3 was really impressive
Mm,
from Boston. Gamzu was a really big part of that. I wanted to see a little bit better play from the team as a whole. In Deathball, we really never saw that from them at any point
mhm.
throughout the season. They were purely a dive-based team. Not sure that was really Gamzu's fault. They really weren't dealing with a full deck of cards when they were in most of the uh, oh my goodness, death ball metas.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. Maybe he was making all the room in the world, and the DPS never got anything done. And at the end of the day, your tank's going to die if nobody's dying on the other team. It just has to happen. But yeah, his Winston was absolutely incredible. He does a really good job flanking and approaching from angles that nobody else does. So it's always a surprise when Gamzu lands on you. And I just think he's earned the spot. He was a pleasant surprise
Mhm.
for the main tank position here.
Yeah. I'm not gonna go through all 5 of mine, but my number 5 tank for my number 5 main tank here was Jae Hong, and that's because when he was out, he was the fifth best tank in terms of win rate for the opposing team.
All I'll say is one of us took our lists much more seriously than the other one.
That is 100% untrue. There's no Twitch emotes on my side next to any of the names that I put.
For number 4 here, I'm going to be going with the one that everybody knows I'm going to be listing here. That's my man Muma from the Houston Outlaws.
Surprised it's so low, honestly, considering how much you talk him up.
It's gotta be like it's honestly just 1 through 3 are like they're required.
Untouchable top 3 here.
To be fair, when I did what I always do when I have this main tank conversation in my head, and that's forget about who I have listed number 3 there.
Yeah.
So I wrote it initially with
Right.
Muma at 3, and then I had to edit it after the fact because I remembered the other guy exists. But yeah, Muma was an absolute stud for the Outlaws all season long. Their tank line is what was their glue. It's what kept them from being an abysmal team in the dive metas and kept them as an average around, hovering around 500 or 50% win rate team in the dive metas. Muma is showing that capability in the World Cup. He continues to impress every time I see the guy get on the stage. And listen, I don't think there's a huge gap even between Muma and number 1 on this list, but they're kind of all lumped up in that top end tier. But results do at the end of the day speak for themselves. Hopefully once we see Muma's Winston with a proper tracer player on the roster and somebody to follow up the kills, things like that, maybe he will move up this list a little bit, but you do have to at some point weigh results, and the Outlaws weren't a playoff team, so go giving it to him.
The only thing I put this in number 4, and our top 3 are the same but in a different order. But how can you not have Mono on here? Mono was a great tank.
He's a solid 6, and honestly, he's really close.
Fair. I'll give you
with Gamzu.
6. Yeah.
He's not. There's nothing wrong with Mono's game. But we've talked about this a lot, maybe more so in Discord, less on the podcast, because I have this conversation a lot in Discord. Mono, to me, he doesn't stand up. He doesn't make plays like every single other one of these guys on this list does.
Yeah.
Muma ends fights on his own, right? Like he just kills 2 supports in the back line and then jumps in and defends.
But he doesn't need to.
And you're not wrong there. But at the end of the day, Mano's a great tank for the Excelsior.
Yeah.
I wouldn't replace him. I wouldn't do anything like that. But listen, this is a league that really outside of NYXL, I think is defined around the quality of your tank line, and the main tank position is one of the most important. So I just got to say, look, from watching them play, he might be overshadowed by the killing prowess of literally everybody else on the NYXL roster. But when I watch them play, I almost never go, man, look at that play Mano just made. Did you see
You're
Mano
not
make
wrong.
that play?
You're not wrong.
I've nothing negative to say about Mano, except it always sounds like I hate him because everybody's always like, why isn't he higher on your list?
Yeah.
Like, just because these guys make plays.
They stand out. But here's the number one selling point for Mano, though.
Mm-hmm.
He's not Janus.
It's true.
that
scientific fact.
That ups him a spot at least. Although now he can't even accidentally be Janus on NYXL. That's the beauty of it. Okay.
But maybe they'll sign Milton.
I would rather have Milton.
I mean, I don't blame you.
I mean, that's actually not
as
true.
They don't, listen, if they had Milton and just never subbed Mano out, the team would have been better off.
You're not wrong. All right, let's talk about the top three here.
Sure. Top three, as you said, our lists are basically the same, a slightly different order here. My number 3 is Fate of the Los Angeles Valiant. He's the one I always forget, the one I never.
You do always forget across multiple shows.
Single time. I'm like, top 3, Gesture, Fissure, Muma, bam, good to go.
And I'm always like,
just like, have somebody's like,
take a look at who got me 400 points last week.
I'm like, oh shoot, you're totally right. Fate exists. Yeah, listen, I wasn't sure going into the season whether or not Fate was super good or Fate and Envy together were super good. That's been put to rest because Fate is not with Envy anymore. Fate is now with Space, who is, in his own right, a very, very skilled tank player. But Fate, listen, there wasn't really a drop off when they made that switch, which I expected. I believed in Space's ability. I just thought some synergy would be a problem, something along those lines. And it never was. Fate is probably, he's a little bit in the Mano camp where he's doesn't make a ton of big plays.
A little bit.
But he's always there. But the difference is, to me, like, just the ultimate usage, I think, is a little bit better for Mano. Like, that's where he does get his big plays. And he's just, I mean, again, like I said, at some point you have to weigh results into this. And we were talking about the Valiant as a team that was imploding during the roster window. And Fate was one of the steady pieces that remained there. And I think he elevated some pretty lackluster DPS players to this number 2 seed going into the playoffs. So I'm going to give Fate the number 3 spot here. He could easily move up this list if he just fragged out a little bit more often. I want to see the big Reinhardt plays. I want to see the big Orisa halts off the map. Those are the things that these other guys do that I don't think he does, and same with Mano, but again, Fate's just a little more frequent. And I do think a little overall stronger just at keeping the team together, making the space that they need for the fight, defining the field of battle for the team fight sort of thing. He's just a really strong, solid overall player.
Yeah. Fate is not as aggressive as, well, the two that are above him, but he does have some of those plays with his Winston primals that really he might not be as consistent with those as Mano is, but he does have the capacity to make those big plays like the other two that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of the other two, we have these in reverse order, but I already listed them off earlier. There's no point. I have Fissure at number 2. Listen, at the end of the day, your best ability as an Overwatch League player is your availability, and I really think Fissure benched himself in the playoffs when his team needed him the most. I absolutely count that against him.
Sure.
He could potentially, he still wouldn't be, I don't think. He could still be right there with Gesture.
Sure.
The mechanical skill, everything like that. I love his play style. He's super aggressive. Listen, if you want to doubt Fissure's impact on a team, go watch stage 1 Gladiators and then go watch stage 2 Gladiators with Fissure. Night and day difference there.
Or if you're watching this in the future, watch Season 1 Soul Dynasty and watch Season 2 Soul Dynasty.
Assuming Soul doesn't choke again.
I
But
mean, Fissure heals
listen,
all wrongs.
if and listen, I didn't factor in handsomeness into my list here because obviously that's a very different list, and Fissure has placed himself at the very top
Wait,
of
that's
that
not
list.
what we're doing. Hold on, I need to
Oh
redo
shoot!
this
Oh shoot!
list.
All my lists are wrong. Yeah, listen, I love if I had to pick a tank to be on my team, right? I think it would probably be Fissure, even though I have him number 2 here.
Mhm,
I love his aggressive play style. Like he just jumps, he just goes. He
mhm.
trusts his team to follow him, to
Yeah.
support him, his healers to heal him, and it works out because the other team is freaking out trying to figure out where this main tank came from.
Mhm,
Very, very in your face style. Probably, if this was most fun to watch main tanks, if Fissure would be in a class all on his own,
mhm.
but it's not. So I'm going to be giving this one to Fissure. And then should I just go into number 1 and you can talk about why you flipped them? All right. So
I,
my number
I
1
I
is
have a one-liner as to why I flipped them. So go ahead.
my number 1 tank here is Gesture from the London Spitfire. I wasn't 100. Like I think if I before the finals, I probably would have put this as Fissure 1,
Mhm,
Gesture 2.
mhm,
There's no main tank. Orisa, Reinhardt, Winston. It doesn't matter. Gesture's the best at it. Or he's right up there with the best at all 3 of the heroes that you're going to want your main tank player to play.
mhm.
There was a huge gap between his Orisa and the entire rest of the field's Orisa, I thought, in the playoffs.
Yeah,
And I think
insane.
so just his depth of hero pool in a position that's 3 heroes deep is markedly better than the entire rest of the field. There's just like no weaknesses to Gesture, right? Like
Nope.
he makes the plays less than Fissure, sure, but he's making those plays from a safer position with more HP. Like that's not a bad thing either.
Yeah, I mean, he
um
also has better support than Fissure has had traditionally.
Excuse me, who's disrespecting Big Goose now?
I
um
don't mean supports specifically. I mean
no,
support
I
as
hear
a
you,
whole
I hear
team.
you.
Also
Yeah,
support specifically.
the I mean, they're definitely part of it. But yeah, listen, I mean, you could definitely be right. Like if Profit's literally killing the entire world on Volskaya Industries in the finals, like
Mhm,
how is it possible for Gesture to look bad there? But I listen, I don't remember a single time from the first season where I thought Gesture was like out of position. I'm sure there was, but it didn't stand out. It wasn't in a big moment or something like that.
mhm,
He's just very consistent. He's always there. And I just think that consistency across heroes, the fact that it just doesn't matter what the meta is, Gesture is going to be a top tier player
mhm.
at that tank spot. I think is just absolutely invaluable. And listen, uh, London agrees too, for what it's worth, because it wasn't Gesture they traded away after stage 1. It
Right?
was Fission. Those two, our number 1 and number 2 players, started on the same
Yeah,
team.
but also
Uh,
who beat them the like very next stage?
who won the league?
Well, I'm not gonna argue that. Who's gonna win season 2?
Well,
Maybe Soul Dynasty with Fissure because that team's gonna be scary.
we will have to wait and see. I am not Doa, so I have a couple more questions than just who's going to be the main tank. If we're talking about them winning the whole thing, I
Sure.
do think, especially with an expanded league, which
Hmm.
should mean more teams make the playoffs, I think there's a really good chance that the Soul Dynasty on that one move alone did enough to put themselves into the playoffs. But
Yeah.
we were talking about winning the whole league. There's still New York and some other teams out there that might have something to say
Sure.
about
Sure.
that. But
Sure.
they might open as pretty good betting favorites. I'll say that much, depending on what other moves make it.
You're certainly not wrong. The only
So what's your
reason.
what's your one liner?
Oh, it's who's better than Fissure? Nobody. Nobody's
Gesture,
better than Fissure. No.
gesture.
I think if you didn't have such fond memories of the finals, watching them live and watching him and you mentioned like you never remember seeing Jester looking bad, but he just looked actively good in the finals at least. And this is in a game where Profit was absolutely popping off. Like I think you can make a very good argument that he should have gotten finals MVP over
Mhm.
Profit. And he
That's where
didn't.
I would have given it.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the I don't remember who we were talking with. Maybe it was Mitch, maybe it was someone else, or maybe it was Hex. It might have been Hex. Um, I think a lot of the like diehards and the like longtime Overwatch Overwatch analysts were like, yeah, that was like it was probably Fisher's MVP, but like you give the trophy to LeBron, you don't give it to someone else, basically. So
Yeah, that's why it should have gone to Gesture.
yeah, but Jester
Like,
wasn't
I
LeBron,
don't know.
even though he might be rocking LeBron's. No, he's not. He's rocking other shoes. I do like Jester's shoes a lot. Um, okay, so there's our top 5 main takes. Let us know what you think. Who would you have had? What was your order? Let us know. Let's move on here to our fourth favorite position, the off tanks. We'll start at the
Sure.
bottom. We
Yes.
both have the same person at the bottom of our list, though mine is a slight asterisk, which you might not know why, but it will become
Yeah,
overly apparent.
your top 5 list, while it only contains
It's
5
5 people.
people, has 6 different things listed.
Yes,
It's
it will make sense. Don't worry.
we'll get there. Listen, I just want to give a quick shout out to my 6th player here, and that is Spree. I really wanted to include him on this list in the off tank position. Name me a player on off tank that had more of an impact on his team when he got the opportunity to play. The only thing that disqualified Spree from this list for me is just sheer amount of play time.
Sure.
But you look at the stats. I mean, even his damage per 10, his eliminations per 10, like any measurable stat other than healing, which just isn't fair to put on a Zarya player,
Sure.
was Spree at the top. He made the absolute most of his opportunities to come into the game, but at the end of the day, didn't quite play enough. I didn't want to include him. So I'm going to put Poco from the Philadelphia Fusion. Listen, he started off so strong. He started off like number 1 on this list. His first stage, like 3-4 weeks into it, it was Nerf Poco t-shirts were flying off shelves. Everything. It was a Poco world. When we were all just living in it, or dying in it because of his self-destructs.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he was just absolutely setting the league on fire. And then he really dropped off a bit. And just I don't know if people got used to his landing spots for his diva bombs, what have you. But he did also at the end kind of I think bring it back a little bit. We saw the Sato Hotba combination, which was just criminal to do to that team. I still want to know what would have happened in that finals if we would have just never brought in the tank swaps that they did.
Yeah.
But Poco did work his way back in, saw a lot of play. I just think, clearly, as we talked about with the main tanks, making big plays is really valuable to me. You need people on your team, and you need a variety of players from a variety of positions that are capable of making big plays. And when I think about big plays from the off tank position, I don't think anybody bigger than Poco here. So just on the sheer strength of just quality of ultimate usage, Poco's here. But also just a really solid main tank. He's good on both of the heroes, Diva and Zarya, that were asked of him. So I think he's just solid all around, and then has that big, huge single I'm pressing Q and winning this fight in a way that nobody else can on his position. So yeah, Poco.
Yeah, I've got regular Poco for my number 6.
At number 6.
Yeah. And I've got we've got the same people on the list, so I'll just talk about mine as we talk about yours. The order for mine don't really matter that much, except for my number 1, which is very clearly the right answer, and you're wrong. But besides that, everything else is fine.
I wish I could give you more flack about it because I have the guy at number 2. It's not I do think it's cool.
My number 2 maybe could be number 1, but
coming in at number 4, I'm gonna go with Space. I wanted to put him higher, and I think his performance isolated into when he got in would have probably bumped him up the list a little bit, maybe put him higher. But we did have a small sample size on him. Mechanically gifted beyond belief. Space is he's a really, really strong player. Very young too. I'm really excited to see where he goes. I think we'll be talking about him as the best diva player in the world before too long. But he didn't come from obscurity, but he didn't come from like the top end of teams either. Right. So I wasn't exactly sure where he would slot in, but listen, he helped that team. He was one of the moves that was made that everybody questioned. I questioned it already on this episode. Is he going to be able to have the same, the same level of impact and synergy with the main tank there? He did. He's doing it for Team USA in the World Cup
Yep.
as well. So I don't think it was a fluke, but at the end of the day, it just felt wrong. Like the other three on my list did so well throughout the entire season
Yeah.
that it just felt a little unfair to be like, well, this guy did great in stage 4, so I'm just going to put him here. But yeah, Space is right up there in the top class of off-tech players with everybody else that we're going to mention.
Yeah, Space is also on the short list of players that a lot of people like. He's one of those players that people talk about, like
Mhm.
on the side, and maybe not the headlines because again, he didn't play a ton. He did great in stage 4. We have the small sample size, but he's like one of the players that like when you ask like either people that are running scrims, people in tier 2, people that have played with him in scrims, and or like analysts and stuff, they're like, yeah, Space is just actually nutty, and you don't even know. And you know who I remember hearing that a lot about? Jonak. We heard that he was one of those players that people talked about. He made an impact for himself without, or a name for himself without even playing in the league, obviously because it hadn't started yet. But people knew about Jonak beforehand, and that's why like we weren't sure because we had never seen him. We didn't know. We had never played with him or anything. But like I remember Bare Hands being like, "You don't even know, man. This kid Jonak, you don't even know." And we did not. We did
He
not
didn't.
know. You got there.
Yeah, so Space is definitely carving out his role to be higher up on this list, but
Mm,
hopefully, and probably will be next season once he gets more than a
mm,
stage in a playoff run under his belt. For number 3 here, I'm going to go with a guy that I would have put number 1 on this list. I think for most of the season,
mm,
that's Note from the Boston Uprising.
mhm.
Loath as I am to put an Uprising player on any of these lists, Note has definitely deserved it. He's been throughout all the problems early on. I'm talking preseason. Note got on our radar as a player that was a
Yeah.
surprise. Everybody thought it was Kalios's job. Note won it outright, and now I think he's a really of the off tanks that play the really aggressive style.
Yeah.
I think Note is probably the best. I think Fury plays a little bit of a hybrid style as
Mhm.
well. But yeah, listen, Note was rock solid even when they were struggling as a team in stage 4, early on in stage 1. He looked to be one of the best players on the team, and that's a team that has some pretty darn good players on it at
Mhm.
the end of the day. So um, listen, he's not Poco. He doesn't have the huge bombs. He doesn't have the great plays,
Mhm.
but he's always there with his Winston when Gamzu's diving. Note is right there behind him, defense matrix up. He's also got his shift up to get back to the back line to protect the supports and peel
Mhm.
that way if you need him to. A very very well rounded all around player is Note, and one of the biggest surprises of the inaugural season.
Yeah. We when we interviewed him way back in the day, we weren't sure what we were going to see out of him, and we got a lot more. I think a lot more than we expected.
Yeah, yeah. Also, when you were too cool to show up that day.
Okay,
Uh,
it was like the fifth time that we had to reschedule because Boston wouldn't let him do the interview for some reason.
that's
Okay.
fair. Oh, no, it was like his PC was like didn't make it on the plane or something. I
That
don't
was
know.
one of the
The
times.
the
Then there
laundry
was
list of
one
reasons that Note had to put
There
off
was
that interview
one that
was crazy.
Boston was like, "Hey, this didn't get approved in time," and there was not like it was an ordeal. Okay,
Listen, all I know is at the end of the day, I was there when the podcast needed me, and you let us down.
I
Moving
was there when we interviewed him the second time.
number 2 on this list, and probably too high now that I'm mad at Blevins. It
Too
should
low.
maybe not even be on this list at
Get out of
all.
here.
Is Mecco of the New York Excelsior. Listen, this is another one of those kind of more defensive style players, I think, but Mecco does it in a way and showed a depth of hero pool that I don't think there a lot of the other off tanks were able to do.
Hmm.
Notably, I think his Roadhog was looked like one of the better among the off tank players,
Hmm.
and he's just one of those guys. I love when you don't have a drop off when you switch between the heroes, right?
Right.
I'm very willing to let my team sub in and out to make it work and to play the best player on the best hero that they need to. But when you cannot do that, it is definitely an advantage for your team. And there's no reason for the New York Excelsior to carry a second off tank player other than he might get sick someday or might need a break or
Hmm.
something along those lines. Mecco's just a rock solid piece for this team. and that's really, really important. And I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's able to do to enable Jonak on the
Right.
Zenyatta, because when you're off support, or your flex support player is playing silly flanks and doing crazy things, and what for most Zenyatta players would be pretty bad positioning.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't die more than everybody else comes down to his support counterpart and the off tank that's helping to protect him and keep him alive. Meko does have some of that kind of big play fragging ability, and we did see it some, but just not a lot, because like we talked about with Mono, there's not a whole lot of room
There's
on this
not a
team
whole
for
lot of
playmakers.
extra damage to go around when
Right.
Jonak does it all.
But notably, see, stage 1, I think, was Meko's best stage, or most noticeable stage, and I do think he made some really, really big plays throughout stage.
Also, from personal experience, a fantastic fantasy player to pick up.
Yeah, and like put him like 7th on the list though, because I screwed up and I wasn't mad at Blevins when I wrote it. He's bad and he should feel
Wrong. Easy number one. Easiest number one. Although arguably, well, we'll go. Well, I'll talk about my number 2 at the end.
Sure. Number 1, I'm putting here based almost solely off of his playoff performance. Listen, there was a lot of struggles for Fury of the London Spitfire throughout the season, but there was a lot of struggles for the entire team. And the tank line is one where when your team's playing poorly, you can't do anything. It's really, really difficult. So I don't know for sure. This could be incorrect just by virtue of maybe more of it was his fault than I was able to identify. I'm not in the VOD review sessions with the coaches, and I don't know what they want them to all be doing all the time. But I really thought most of London's problems were support and DPS play. I really didn't put a lot of it on the tank line. I did ask Fury to step it up in the playoffs, because I thought he was leaving a little bit on the table late in the season and in the middle of the season, but he did in a huge way. I think playoff MVP overall probably would have been Fury for me. He stepped up, and in the big moment, he made a lot of really, really clutch, really big plays for London. A big part of the reason why they made it to the finals. And then, Gesture and Prophet stole the show there. He continued to play really well, but those two played out of their minds. So, listen, Blevins, I'm sure after this season, you've got a new appreciation for the clutch factor, the ability to do it in the big moment.
New appreciation. I was calling that out for the whole time. That's what I was saying. Was
your team choked so hard? That's all I know.
Oh God. No, I was talking about clutch factor for the whole time. Like, that's the wow factor, the clutch factor that NYXL absolutely doesn't have, and that players like Gesture and Prophet absolutely did have. And Carpe too, to an extent.
We were beating that drum all season, and when people were talking about the playoffs, like, "Oh, Nixel's just going to win. It's not even going to be fun to watch."
Or why are we playing these?
And I'm like, have we seen? Like,
it's not
go
a computer simulation, bro.
Go watch sports. It happens. The clutch, the moment. Some guys live for it. Some guys die in it. And Fury lived in it, thrived in it, and it defined his season for me. So I'm willing to overlook any mistakes he made in stages 2 and stage 3, because he put his team in the grand finals, as far as I'm concerned, and then helped him win it. So I'm going to give Fury my number 1 spot.
Yeah. And speaking of living in the moment and wow factor, I'm moving it up to number 1. My number 1 is Poco Prime. And that is the top prime level Poco, the Poco Bomb Poco, the Poco that we saw at times in the grand finals, the Poco that we saw in the first few weeks of stage 1. That was just absolutely mind blowing. Like, yes, he had some downtimes, and consistency certainly an issue. And depending on how you make your list, maybe you wouldn't include number 1 Poco on here, but you know what? I want to take that essence of what Poco's potential, what I'm calling Poco Prime. It's number 1 in my book, because if you could run just that Poco and he always played like that, who would you put over him? Not very many people. Not very many people.
One thing that I'm very glad Meko is no longer number 1 on your list.
All right.
Shout outs. Listen, if the ability to create memes was a factor, Cool Matt would have been on this list as well. Because Please Kill Cool Matt Please remains one of the funniest things from
No,
season
that
one.
wouldn't be that wouldn't be that wouldn't be Cool Matt that goes on it. That would be Effect that goes on that list because he's the one that said it, isn't it?
Yeah, he said it, but he wouldn't have had to say it if Cool Matt wasn't, stealing his
I
lunch
mean,
money and
you're not wrong.
living in his pockets the whole game.
You're not wrong.
But yeah, I know he fell off too much in the in those middle stages. I felt like he was low key part of the dive problem, but nonetheless, that wraps up the off tank discussion, and we'll move into the DPS category here.
Yes.
I know one person in our Discord at a bare minimum will be triggered by our tracer list here.
Yes. I'm triggered by your tracer list.
That's fine. One thing I want to say, we're talking about top 5 performances from season 1. I'm not necessarily saying that this is the most skilled player, the most skilled tracer player, although it low-key probably is.
I mean, mine is, but yours is.
So number 5, Jake from the no, we're totally kidding. He was our meme. Jake and Linkser and Clockwork are all honorable mentions here.
I was gonna make a legitimate argument for Clockwork, but I already used up the joke I was gonna use on Jae Hong for tank, so he's gone.
Oh, there we have it. Leave my outlaws alone. Okay.
He's not even on the team anymore, so you don't even need to worry.
The real number 5 here, and this is on both of our lists, is Sinatraa from the San Francisco Shock. Listen, we love Dante in stage 1, and I don't think anybody would say Sinatraa played worse than Dante when he came in. His tracer play, listen, there's drop off here. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think he's 4A and 4B with the guy above him. I don't think that's even close to true, but I think there's a big drop off here between 4 and 5 in particular. But Sinatraa is a very above average tracer player, really, really strong on the hero. I'm becoming a bigger fan of Sinatraa because of the versatility he's showing me in the World Cup. Versatility wins you no points in this conversation. We were just talking about pure tracer acumen. And Sinatraa has been at it for a really long time. There's some consistency problems. He disappears a little bit on occasion, but he also has that huge play ability in him. I'm thinking last year's World Cup, chasing people around deep into, what was it, Lijiang Tower or whatever it was. There's a lot of really big moments that Sinatraa creates from the tracer position. And I think he's very, very seldom is he, bad or not doing what he needs to be doing. He just doesn't always stand on his head and make huge plays like basically everybody on the list does at times above him. Yeah.
Sinatraa, good. I got nothing else to say about Sinatraa.
Yeah. Very, very solid player. Sorry to the Sinatraa hater in our Discord whose name I'm forgetting at the time, but you're wrong. And number 4 on my list here, listen, again, this is purely tracer. But Carpe comes in at number 4 on my list here. I think some people would have him a little bit higher, but the names above him, guys, I promise they're not slouches. And your ability to pick heads and single-handedly win fights while screaming winnable into your headphones endears me to you incredibly as a fan. He did it on Widow. He did it on Widow.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That I wasn't even thinking about that when I made this. My list is basically just jumbled up. So
right. And don't worry, he's on both lists.
My number 1 is correct, but everything else is
your number 1 is probably correct for best players, but not top season 1 performances.
That's fair
in my opinion.
That's fair.
Almost. But I can make an argument for literally 1 through 4 at number 1 without batting an eye.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I wouldn't argue with you on any of them either.
Right. Yeah, and none of them are crazy options to pick, but Carpe comes in for me. Listen, there was times, it was just basically he couldn't get higher on this list because like Snillo was coming in to play Tracer because he needed to play Widowmaker, and we didn't get to see a ton of it, and I'm sure it would be right up there with all the other ones, and really it was. What we saw, there was never a problem with Carpe's Tracer. It was just, did they need it, or was it what he was being asked to play? The fact that there was a Widow Tracer meta hurt him in this conversation a good bit. Absolutely one of the best Tracers in the league, though. Can stand up to any one of these guys here. Would probably, like I said, there's a big gap gap, in my opinion, between Sinatra and Carpe on this particular hero, and they're 4 and 5 on my list. So we'll see if he gets a little more time on it. I'm sure he'll be higher on the list next time around. But right now, you have to separate the Widowmaker plays out of this conversation and leaves him at number 4.
Yeah, definitely. This is a stacked list.
Super stacked. Yeah. So going into number 3 on this super stacked list
You're
is
first wrong.
Blevins is number 1. And that, of course, means from the New York Excelsior, we have SBB,
Obviously.
Listen,
Obvious number 1.
like we said, I won't argue with any of these guys. I won't say a bad thing about any of these guys on Tracer. SBB, though, did do a little bit of rotating with his DPS core. And if he was hands down the best, maybe they wouldn't have felt like they could just do that. I don't really know. They might have just thought they could style on people and do whatever they wanted. That's certainly an option as well. There's a lot of playmakers on the New York, so we can't express that enough when we have these conversations. It's really hard to talk about individual performances for NYXL players when the whole team did so good for 4 stages, like or three stages, 3.5 stages. They just absolutely stood head and shoulders above everybody else. SBB is a crucial shot caller for the team as we understand it. Which definitely, helps his individual value as well. But just raw performance output on the Tracer hero, I'm going to put him number 3.
Criminally undervalued.
I'm punishing you by changing my Widowmaker rankings on the fly.
Scum. Actual scum.
Oh, God.
Now you've just ruined the whole list.
Yeah, the whole everything's broken.
Well, let's talk about your number 2 here. And honestly, the fact that not only the fact that this is number 2, but also who your number 1 is probably the most surprising thing for me on this list.
Sure. Prophet is number 2 for me. Listen, this is a player that I would say is probably the best overall DPS in the league.
Hard to argue.
And that is because of his flexibility. The fact that he's this good. If we list out top 5 of every DPS hero in the game, I would just by default put Prophet on every single hero number 5 and then adjust from there if I think he's better than that. But listen, on Tracer alone, I think there's only one guy that stands out to me as better. When you talk about, the dive metas, those were some of the big problems for the London Spitfire. None of that was on Prophet. When you watch the tape, he's doing work. He's out there. His DPS partner, maybe on the other hand, was slumping pretty hard and had some problems. But listen, what can't Prophet do? Like, go watch in the clutch moments, the big play was Tracer that he made the 5K on Volskaya in the finals. Even like the guy can just single-handedly shut you down and kill your entire team on a 150 HP hero that is a sitting duck once she uses her E. Like it is remarkable what he's been able to do at times on Tracer specifically. So I'm going to give it to Prophet, but it's hard to talk too much about it because every time I talk about Prophet, that's all I want to talk about is his versatility. But Tracer is kind of his main role, the default thing he rolls out on. And it's right up there with anybody. So
I'll say not voted to the All-Star team. So
just a replacement player. Hashtag worse than Birdring. That leaves number 1.
Who does chat and who do the viewer, who do you think is going to be Deathblow's number 1 here?
Yeah, so you guys are on a delay. We'll give you a little bit of time here. You can get your answer in, but for the sake of the audio recording, I'm just gonna give it here. Striker from the Boston Uprising. Listen, when they went on their 10-game win streak, you know who wasn't there? Dreamcasper. Like Mistakes was playing the other DPS role.
Yeah.
So Striker was playing like 1.5 DPS characters worth of output at that time. And like they only fell off when the only time Boston looked bad was when Striker wasn't able to play this hero. So he was like the thing that kept Boston ticking. He was what made them operate and what made them successful to me at all times. I don't see how this list can possibly start with anybody other than Striker. And like I said before, I'm loath to include a single one of the Boston players. Yet here I am listing off my third one, because they just had it for a good long time.
Yeah.
They were the team. They were terrifying to beat, and nobody struck more fear in the hearts of the enemy team, and I can guarantee you from their fan base than
Yeah.
Striker. And we were getting tips about this from Grim Reality before the season started. When
another one of the players that the players would talk about, like,
Yep.
Striker is good.
Yeah, and TMP said it in chat. Striker just hard carried so many times. There were fights, maps, matches that Striker just put that team on his back and carried him through. Didn't need everybody else. Clearly didn't need good support play because they weren't getting it.
Yeah.
So Striker comes up big here. Absolutely top tracer. Light years better than SBB.
Shut up. Here's an interesting question. Where, and it really 100% subjective, and there's no way we could ever know the answer to it, but where do you think that effect would be if he actually decided he wanted to play and exerted himself and played to the potential that we know that he could be? Where do you think he'd be on this list, and would he even be on the list?
I think he'd be number 5. I'll believe somebody's better than Carpe, SBB, Prophet, and Striker on this particular hero the moment I see it, and not before.
True.
He's got the potential to be at number 1 on the list, but like I say, you need big plays, you need results, you need all these things, and there at no point did his team win a match. One match didn't happen with effect on the field. Maybe a non-Shanghai match, I should say. So it was just a rough go from, but results are required to be on this list.
True.
In a lot of ways. So I've got to give it to I got to say he'd probably pencil in above Sinatra. But other than that,
I don't think I disagree there. Let's move on here to our number 2 spot, our number 2 position here, and that is Widowmakers.
Yes.
Fun.
Also, chat, go ahead and tell me who you think I put number 1 on this particular list.
And then also who do you think I put number 1? This is probably the easiest ones for us to the 2 easiest ones to predict here.
But we'll start at the bottom of the list, so we'll get to Blevins's sooner than we'll get to mine. And that is number 5 here is Surefour. Oh boy, Sean, you're just gonna be so mad.
Yikes!
So mad. Okay,
that's a yikes from me, dog.
Surefour. He was on my first pass to the list, Sean. I'll say that much. Sorry, podcast land. We're interacting with chat a little bit. Sean said Saya player or Ryan.
He also said that he was going to sue us if Logix wasn't on the tracer list.
Yeah,
so.
just a bad day.
Yikes!
Listen,
yikes!
It's a definite yikes for me.
Also, Monkey Prince may or may not know us.
Yeah, a little bit. Monkey Prince does know who we are. So Surefour is my number 5 here. Listen, this is you got to take the whole season into account, and he might have been a spot or 2 higher on this list if it was only second half rankings or something like that.
The All-Star Game challenge,
right? Stage 1 was a real thonker for the gladiators. And Surefour is probably the most improved Widowmaker throughout the course of the season, but this is also the one spot too where I'm not weighing team performance as much here, just because as a sniper you're very much so kind of just on your own, operating completely independently of your team. So I just want to see ability to kind of single-handedly win fights from my Widowmaker. And man, so Surefour was really tough. This is another one of those lists where I wanted Saya on my list. I really did. He was probably number 3 when I first wrote it up, and then I just kept having to drop him down. And I already don't like my list. Number 2 I think is wrong. I don't know. This one I really struggled with.
It's tough. A lot of talent.
There's a lot of talent. And like I said, I don't want to weigh team performance too much, but you have to do a certain extent. And Surefour was also just not that great on Widowmaker in the early stages. It wasn't
True.
a matter of was the team doing bad. It's like he wasn't doing great
Right.
on it at the time. He ended up there with any of them. The ability to play the best players in the league to a draw, but I'm not sure how many times I saw him outright beat any of the other players on this list. Playing
Except
people
in
to a
the
draw
in
is
the
great.
1v1 Widowmaker challenge.
Right, right. But that's not Overwatch. So
No, it sure is
um,
not.
but yeah, listen, I don't know how many times I just saw him outright dominate any of the other players on this list. And I think every other
Right.
player on this list had moments and times when
Mhm.
in a 1v1 scenario on the stage in an actual match,
Yep.
they did decidedly beat one of the other ones
Mhm.
here. So I'm going to be giving it to Pine. I'm going to be giving it to Surefour here for number 5. But
Speaking
by
of
the end
Pine.
of the season, he got higher up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pine, my number 4 is Mr. Bad Positioning
Oh,
himself.
that part
Listen,
is true.
and that's what hurt him here. That's honestly what hurt him here because he checks every other box. It's just that like it makes no sense. Why are you there? Why are you doing this? Okay, fine. You killed 4 people. That's great. And I guess that matters the most. But another thing that hurt Pine was that he was like just coming in. He wasn't their only Widowmaker. He wasn't their specialist. He was like their meme specialist in a way.
Right.
But listen, I don't know that anybody else appeared in our top 10 plays more often. He could
True.
easily be higher up on this list. Really, honestly,
Certainly.
I could shuffle 2, 3, 4 up on my lists and be just as happy with any of
Yeah.
the outcomes. So I don't want to harp on him too much, but Pine did and he also had to like disappear for an entire stage.
That's true.
So
That's
he's got
true.
that. He's got a smaller sample size,
And
but there's
also
somebody.
Spider Pine. Ugh.
Spider Pine, yeah.
Ugh.
I don't want to hold that against him too much either, but we did see some pretty questionable stuff from that, and it's got to all factor in just as much as all the smart, great plays he made. Even if listen, just because you're memeing doesn't change the point of this exercise in New York. But yeah, I don't know. Listen, I love Pine. Nobody gets me to type PogChamp and Twitch chat faster than Pine. But at the end of the day, I wanted players that played more consistently for their teams and didn't share widow time with 2 other players on their own roster to be higher up.
What I'll say, because okay, obviously I have Pine at number 1. Like everyone in the
do.
world knows that. There was nothing you could do or say that would get me to change that. I don't think there's another player in the league that strikes fear into the other team like Pine does. There's no one like okay, yes, you're going against Carpe, you're going against Profit, you're going to like yes, but it's more like okay, we need to play around them. It's not like you're actively afraid of them. And with Pine, I think that a lot of teams played around it like we need to utterly change our game like the old days when Pluppy would be destroying people with Junkrat.
I think that was true for your Florida Mayhems, for your Shanghai Dragons, for your suboptimal teams. But I think the best teams wanted Pine in because of his positioning problems. Like all we've got to do is spot him out and scout him, and we'll be okay. And if their scouting was better, and if their call outs were maybe a little better, he would have had way less PogChamp plays and big moments. So I don't know. And listen,
he still had the plays.
You're not right. I mean, he's still here. And like I said, I could put him at 2 on my own list and be completely happy with it and not think it was, there was anything wrong.
So what you're saying is Pine is number 2 on your list. Okay, let's move on.
Pine is number 1 on my most exciting Widowmakers to watch.
Okay.
List, hands down.
I'll give you that.
Number 3 here though, is Carpe. He single-handedly won maps and big moments and map 5's and things like that for his team with this particular hero. An absolute beast. He can go toe-to-toe with any Widowmaker in the league. There's what bad? How do you say anything bad about Carpe? You really can't do it. The only thing I will say about him and why he's not higher on this list is, and it might have been the team as a whole, but I'm going to discount team struggles in these conversations for Widows.
Sure.
He disappeared sometimes. There was times he just would quiet down. And
happened in the finals.
The team, and the team was really, really reliant on Carpe being at his best against top flight opponents. They could beat
Hmm.
Anybody at any time,
Yeah.
as long as Carpe was playing at his best. Um, but he didn't always play at his best. And I
True.
think there were other players that were a little more consistent than him. And that's why those players are at the top. Now, as we go into my number 2 player here, I want you to forget how many times I mentioned sample size and play time and everything like that, because this is the one player on all these lists that bucks that trend completely, and that is Architect. I think he is the only player that ever outright dominated and beat my number 1 on this list, and it happened once, and it gave his team the upset win over Houston. It's Linkser, you all know. So yeah, listen, I think he came in, he made a big statement,
Hmm.
and I wish he'd been around longer because he was an absolute surprise. And this was a hero that I don't think people thought was in his hero pool. I could be wrong, but I think he was thought of as like a projectile god. So like your Genji, he was the Junkrat that might have been better than Jake, but it was that kind of a guy, right? I don't think
Hmm.
we really expected him to pop out of nowhere and be a Widowmaker like this. Similar to Saya player in the impact they had to their rosters, but
Hmm.
I think the performance is why Architect's on this list and Saya players not mechanical skill.
Hmm.
I think Saya's right there equivalent with Architect
Sure.
and Linkser, and mechanically the top 3, 4, 5, even 6, 7 are probably
Right.
all pretty close. But yeah, Architect I think really has the most upward potential, the highest ceiling for what he
Hmm.
can give you on this particular hero of
Yep.
anybody in the league. And that's really saying something when you look at the company that's here on this list. My number 1, of course, Linkser from the Houston Outlaws. The only times where they were bad, it was like hard to kind of fit Widowmaker in, and she had a place in dive.
Hmm.
But really, like I said, their issues were never, oh, Linkser's not good enough at
Right.
Widowmaker. It's that there's no Tracer here. Like when
Yeah.
the meta was Tracer Widow, they only had half of what they needed, and
Yeah.
that half was always Linkser. I never saw him really play it poorly. Like I said, there were times when he had consistency problems, but he was never like he disappeared. It was just,
Right.
oh, we really needed him to carry, and he
Right.
didn't quite carry, but he always did his job. He always was getting picks, and he had that dominating performance against your Carpes, against your he played Pine to draws. I don't think he ever dominated Pine or dominated the XL Widow play at any point. But there's only one time all season I thought he got beat. I'm sorry, 2 times. 2 times he got beat.
Hmm.
One was Dia
Oh,
in
right.
the ridiculous pop
Yep.
off performance that would have beaten anybody on the planet.
Yep.
And then the other time was Architect in the upset loss. I think it was the final stage 4,
Hmm.
to the San Francisco Shock. That might have been Linkser's worst performance, but sometimes it's hard to know in a Widow v Widow contest like
Right.
that. Like, is Linkser playing bad, or is Architect just out of his mind? Because Architect wasn't
Right.
only hitting ridiculous shots on Linkser,
Right.
he was hitting them on literally the entire Outlaws squad
Exactly.
in that match. So, yeah, I'm going to give it to Linkser. I've not seen anything. I need to see more performances where he gets beat. And it's got to not be when that player's playing in an outlier, crazy top of the, you know what I mean? Top of their absolute ceiling condition, right? They've got to not be popping off in a way that they don't normally do it. Find me a Widowmaker that can beat Linkser regularly. And I'll move him off the top spot. I think he usually gets the edge.
Yeah, I mean, Linkser has been one of the like most consistent and best players of Widowmaker for like a very long time. Like I remember back in the day, like he was like the definition. He was the
Mm-hmm.
gold standard for widows for a long time. Yeah, I had Linkser at 2 because I mean, obviously I'm putting Pine number 1, but
Got him. Yeah, you had to
Linkser
put them in there.
certainly Linkser
I will
certainly strong.
I will say this though, going into season 1, I thought there was a huge gap between Linkser and the rest of the Widowmakers that had signed up. I do think that's closed tremendously.
Mhm.
It's now very, very close in this top 5 conversation, where I would have thought there was much more variation, things like that. But yeah, giving it the completely unsurprising Linkser pick.
Yeah, completely unsurprising. Before we move on, I just want to say one quick thing. Uh, get wrecked, scrub. Let's move on to. That's in reference to Twitch chat.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our number one favorite, number one favorite position here. That's really not what it is, but I mean it's mine because it has my favorite everything in it. But it's going to be top five supports here.
Sure.
Who do you got for number five?
Number five, I'm going to give it to Shaz. I thought the Gladiators got a lot of work done with the Shaz Big Goose combo, but I do think Shaz carried them a little bit in the Mercy meta. He's just an unbelievable Zenyatta. He's got the flexibility to go into whatever hero you can play. We've seen the guy play Genji at times. I mean, that doesn't help you in the top five support category,
Mm-hmm.
but it should give you some idea. He can do absolutely anything you need him to do from the support line. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Shaz from the LA Gladiators. I thought he carried a team that didn't have a Mercy player through 3 stages of Mercy play.
Mm-hmm.
Got them into the playoffs, and he was a big part of that. Also, I don't know, I was just big on him coming into it, and I didn't see anything to deter me away from that. So if I'm building a team and Jonak's unavailable, I'm picking Shaz to be my build around piece.
Not a bad choice whatsoever. I mean, I feel like we've just seen it so much that like if you have Shaz on your team, you're probably getting Big Goose too. It's like a wombo combo. Like you're getting them
Right.
both, so it's a 2-for-1 special. Who do you got for number four?
Number four, I'm going to go with Neptuno of the Philadelphia Fusion. We
Him
didn't
and
get to
Muma
see.
are like your favorite players. You got them everywhere.
I mean, I definitely really like them. I don't know too many people would contest the Muma one. This one might not be as common of a pick
Hmm.
for the top 5 list. But listen, when you have a Mercy player and that Mercy player is able to win team fights on their own
Hmm.
and doesn't do so at the cost of bad positioning or risky play. I mean, just sees an opportunity, is right in identifying that
Hmm.
opportunity and executes it. I think that's something you can't ignore. His healing's up there, his survivability, all that stuff. If those were higher, then it wouldn't be worth the battle mercy plays, the
Right.
attempts
Yeah,
at
we
those
looked at
things.
the stats, and it really wasn't at much of a cost at all.
Yeah, so you're getting, kind of run of the mill top tier. Run of the mill top tier is a contradiction in terms, but you get my point. You're getting top tier mercy play
Mhm.
from this guy, and then oh yeah, sometimes he's just gonna play DPS in that fight, but only when it works. Like I don't ever remember seeing him pop Volk, fly in and die. Like
No, he's not
maybe
Bonnie.
once, right? But it's like it didn't happen with any sort of regularity that
Right.
makes me think it was caused by his over aggression or anything
Right.
like that. So I love that ability when I can get that from a position and nobody else in the league can get that from that position.
Hmm.
Then I rate that very very highly. So I'm gonna put Neptuno here. I don't think it would have worked out that way if it wasn't so much moth meta the entire season, but here we are.
Yeah. I mean, Neptuno's good. I got won over a little bit watching the finals and watching him and pop off with it, but
Yeah. Even when his team was just losing around him,
true.
like he still was a
Still
standout,
doing well.
very good
Not
support.
Yeah, definitely grew on me a bit. Uh, let's go. Oh, and the reason I have one pick here. There only needs to be one pick here, so my list is very short. It's of one. But who's your number three?
My number three is Bedosin from the London Spitfire. Hurt a little bit by some inconsistency in his own position, right? Like there was some
Mhm.
early times when Hagopin was coming in and he was coming out. I thought that hurt his ability to get some momentum and perform his best. Um, but he looked like most of the season the second best Zenyatta player in the league,
Mhm.
in such a valuable position. Clearly, the flex support, you're so vulnerable on Zen,
Mhm.
and you have so much output potential as far as damage and healing is concerned, that to have such a solid player in Bedosin doesn't. I mean, nobody has the standout performances of Jonak that he has on the hero in particular. But Bedosin was the closest. I thought he made um, some of the bigger plays, at least with a higher frequency than some of the other guys do.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with him, and I think it would have been more apparent that he was as good as he is if it hadn't been a revolving door in the other half of his duo. Because even
Yeah.
once Hagopin was released, they kept Closer and Nuss. They were switching those two around a little bit right up until the very end,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that hurt him some. So I'd like to think he might have been able to get up to 2 on this list if London had just started their best players all season.
Yeah, but I mean, they probably still would have won the championship, but maybe they would have. It would have been a much smoother ride to victory. Maybe they would have gotten a bit more prize money with the state championships. But yeah, can't really complain too much about how they ended up performing. Who do you got for number 2?
Number 2 is Arc from the New York Excelsior. So that's going to put back-to-back New York Excelsior players at the top of this
Wait,
list.
but who could your number 1 be?
Animo. Yeah, really.
Easiest Animo.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, Arc was had a much more play time than Animo did, and their stats were very comparable. But when you sort the stat list by deaths, okay, it's Animo number 1 and then Arc number 2 with the fewest deaths of anybody in the league, regardless of position. So that includes your 500 HP tanks, your 2 life having diva mains that get knocked out of mech, and that doesn't count as an elimination. Arc on Mercy was dying less than all of them, just 3.21 deaths per 10 minutes. When you compare that to, let's see, Closer on the other side was 3.8. And you just look at some of the other ones, you look at Nuss, he was 4.47. Like, to be sub 3.5 in this conversation is a really, really big deal. And really, outside of Closer, there was not many people that were even close to him other than Animo. Which makes me think there's a slight chance that it was just the hard carry of the entire rest of the NYXL team. Like, how many eliminations were up for grabs in those positions. But at the end of the day, as we've seen from some other players in the Mercy position, you can get yourself out of position. You can get yourself to die in some stupid ways. Not something Arc did ever.
Right. And how many of those deaths were him suiciding himself to reset?
Right.
That's the other question.
A huge percentage of their losses before the whole "we've clinched first place and we're sandbagging" spot now was like 33% of their losses was the one time Arc was sick.
True.
I mean, tell me that that's not speaking to how valuable he was to that team.
Right.
And then when his healing numbers were also again right there, number 2 behind Animo. Yeah, maybe it should have been Animo instead of Arc. I don't really know. Clearly, they've got
it's the thing about NYXL. Well, yeah, the thing about NYXL is it's not about specific stats for anyone. It's about how they work around their very unique strategy of like Jonak is the center of the universe. If you don't fit in with that, you don't work. That's why we talk so much smack about Janus, even though he's almost certainly going to be a great tank with the DC team. He just did not fit with he didn't fit with the program. And that's not good.
Nope. And then number 1 on this list, of course, as we said, is the MVP of the league. That's Jonak. Jonak. The guy has DPS numbers from a support role, and he played it in a way. The Jonak syndrome was a thing for a while. Like, every Zenyatta in the world was trying to play like Jonak does, and that meant everybody in the world was playing poorly. Except for him, because he's the only one with the skill cap and the mental not capacity, but like state of mind, I guess is the right thing to like perform in that way and make those decisions and make them correctly. So there's no conversation here. It has to be Jonak. He was the key to the whole strategy for the most successful team throughout the regular season.
Easy Jonak, easy life.
Don't ask him to play Roadhog anymore, please.
Yeah,
New York.
part of the reason that we did top 5 Tracers and top 5 Widowmakers and not top 5 DPS is that Jonak would have infiltrated the top 5 DPS role. Almost
one of our lists. He would have.
At least half of our list would have had at least one spot taken up by Jonak. But that's gonna be it for our top 5 top 5s. It's not really the top 5 top 5s. It's a 5 top 5s. I thought it was fun. We went massively over time, but that's okay. Yeah, you were right. But I hope you guys like it. Let us know what you think. If there's any lists that you want us to talk about, maybe we'll make a Discord channel where people can just suggest top 5s, and we'll pull from them every once in a while. They're nice to have for a rainy day, which today literally was, and also figuratively was a rainy day. But so that was good. But that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Hopefully, fingers crossed, next week, this time next week, we will have some juicy news with that October 6th being that date, that turning point for us. Maybe we'll get some announcements and stuff by then. But Def, any last minute stuff before we head out?
No, just remember the free agent free for all window opens on Saturday, so we should be getting a ton of info there. So looking forward to that. And otherwise, no, we'll see you guys next week.
We will see you guys next week, but that's going to be it for Deathblow. I'm the Levins. Remember, it's high noon.
It's high noon.
Oh, button just doesn't work. Great. That's it, guys. We'll
You
see.
can do the outro in post.
We'll see you guys later.